Welcome to True and Unpolished, the podcast, a Cusp culture production. Through this podcast, our intention is to uplift, inspire, and amuse.
Let's get authentic. Well, hello there, everybody. This is Lydia and Mary with True and Unpolished, the podcast. And today we do not have a Mary's Peep, but what we do have is Mary and we each picked an episode that we have done and kind of picked one that we felt like we had an aha moment about, or maybe we had something we wanted to add to it. So we are going to share right now. Mary is going to start us out. So Mary, which episode stood out to you and what do you want to talk about with it?
Well, the episode that really stood out to me is the one on healing through art with Jim Dukes. And of course, for me, this is really what I'm passionate about because I'm an art therapist. Yeah. And so that's why I wanted to talk about that episode. But what really stood out is one of the things that Jim said was about being vulnerable. And so what he did was he made a choice that really, I think, is a choice that we all can make at some point in our life. And it's the hard choice, and it is staring fear in the face. Yeah. And doing the thing that we're afraid of anyway, and being willing to be vulnerable to do that. And Jim's story is a great example of that. And I was like, when I was listening to the episode, what I was trying to do was, because my program is called Create More, and it's a foundational program for the courses that I'm developing. And MORE is an acronym. And so MORE is motivation to break the rules.
Love it.
Owning your ability to create the life you want. And that's what that vulnerability piece is about, is being willing to own it. Yeah. I can step into my light and what I'm here to do, my purpose, or I can stay small. Right. And that's something that I literally struggle with every single day. Yeah. Is owning my ability and knowing that I have the choice to create more of the life that I want for myself. Yeah. But so the third is radically accepting life on life's terms, or life as it is. Yeah. And finally, it's engaging in the present, which because of the acronym, it comes last. But really, mindfulness maybe should be first. But whatever, that's the acronym I came up with. Right. And it doesn't have to be in order. It's just the acronym. It's to remind us that those are kind of the keys. Right. And I mean, I think this works because mindfulness, or engaging in the present, is a journey anyway. So it's not always first. Yeah. Anyway. Right. So I think the big thing about that episode, and really the power of using art for healing, and I'm a visual artist, and that's really what I focus on and what I teach, but it doesn't have to be visual art. It could be music, it could be dance, it could be, writing, any form of art. But what Jim did is he said yes to healing. And the other beautiful part about his story was how life has responded for him. Yeah. And, we talked about how just these amazing opportunities, like he's now the director of this really cool art center in Charlotte, North Carolina. So all these great opportunities seemingly just fall in his lap. Right. And it's because he's willing to say yes, and he's willing to be vulnerable and just let life lead him. Yeah. And it all started with him taking pictures. He's like, okay, I have a phone. I can take pictures, and expressing himself through that, which to me is
just amazing. Like I am not, I am now because of you and because of knowing you and what you've taught me.
Yeah.
But I am just not a person that thinks, okay, I'm experiencing pain. What do I do? Well, what I do is, meditate or go to a book or go to a podcast or, that sort of thing. And what I love is that Jim is a reminder that there is, you can open up your journal and start drawing a mandala. Like you can just start, getting it out there. And it's a way of expression. It's taking it out of your head, out of your body and getting it out,
Right.
So I thought that was really powerful and it spoke to me. And I think that, us average Joes who don't necessarily consider ourselves artists, it doesn't occur to us that art can be an avenue for healing. And it was really cool for me. Like that is what stood out for me in that episode for sure.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of cultures, like African cultures, they don't understand therapy. Like what are you doing sitting in a room talking about your problems? The way that they do it is through the arts very often and community. So dancing and, ritual kinds of art related things is how they heal, and and that's what animals do, like through the, like shaking it off, like water off a duck's back or whatever that saying is.
Yeah, that's the saying.
Yeah. So, it's, to me, as somebody who has done this work, is, when we experience a trauma, for instance, the information is stored. I think I've talked about this before, but, we're experiencing the trauma through our senses. We see it, we smell it, we taste it, we touch it, we hear it. We don't experience words, that could be a part of it, what we're hearing or whatever. But it's not like we're in our mind, we have words. We're experiencing it, our life and trauma kinesthetically.
Right.
So
the senses, sure.
Right. So that information gets stored, in our brain. And so to be able to find words to explain what happened or explain why I'm having these problems as a result of the trauma or painful experience really kind of doesn't make sense. But being able to access the sensory aspects of our experience draws from another place and makes it a little easier sometimes to express if we're willing to be vulnerable, because we're not a trained artist or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because the episode that I'm going to talk about, can I start talking about mine? Because it actually fits in really well. So the one that I was going to talk about is with Susan Yelverton. And the title is Love Thyself. And I guess we should have done a disclaimer. Like, you guys, if you haven't listened to these episodes, well, I think you can listen to this one first. But Susan came on and talked about self-compassion and self-love. And I am reading, someone gifted me a book from Sarah Blondin. And she has a ton of meditations on Insight Timer, like, really, she's just a very heart-centered human being.
Right.
I wasn't planning on talking about this, but it goes along with what you were saying. She said that she got a letter from, someone that, follows her and does her meditations. And it was a woman who lived in this very, very small community that, only had like 150 people in the community. And in a month's time, like 25 people died. And so what happened is this woman and a group of like 4 other people got together and created a dance to express the pain that this, little town had experienced. And so she described how everybody came, they did this dance. And then what happened was a bunch of crying and hugging and, even sometimes laughter. It was just an avenue for it. And I thought that was really beautiful, and it fits in with exactly what you were talking about. That's why I butted
Well, that's funny because I have a peep.
You have a peep? You have a dance peep? Of course you do.
Yeah, conscious dance. And she does rolfing, which is something I'm curious about. But anyway, that's for another day. I'll have to contact her. It's Anne Marie Cockrell.
Awesome. Yeah. So another peep is yet to come. So back to Susan's episode on self-compassion. She talked about how she, kind of wished that she could go back like 15 years and just be like, as she called it, a self-compassion fairy, and just sprinkle like self-compassion all over her journey, mindfulness journey, because she realized
that's such a cool visual.
I know, it stood out to me.
So good at that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, she had an amazing quote too, that maybe I'll mention in a second, but y'all listen to the episode because it's awesome.
Well, I want to hear the quote.
Well, I wrote it down, I think. So she said, because, her background was theater and my background is theater. So I really related to that. I relate to her in a lot of different ways. And she said that in theater, she got the opportunity. It was a safe space in which you could try on being other people. And mindfulness is a place where you try on being yourself. And mindfulness, as soon as we begin to really, embrace mindfulness, what happens is we become aware of our thoughts and we go, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I think that thought, and then right after we start judging ourselves. In my experience, right at the beginning of mindfulness, I was probably the most unkind to myself because of the thoughts that were in there. I was judging myself for thoughts, which is ridiculous because thoughts occur until they don't. And so she was talking about self-compassion, and I'm reading this book by Sarah Blondin. And in this book, she is talking about this idea of really, opening your heart. Like, to her, it is, she says in one of her meditations, change nothing about your experience except for the amount of love that you give yourself. Like, change nothing. And that goes back to your acronym, accepting life on life's terms, and the recognition. And it spoke to me so much, because I'm going through this layer of healing, this new layer that I invited at the beginning of the year to go away. And what that has done is it has left me vulnerable and exposed. And what hit me when you were talking, Mary, is that I think I've always understood that there were layers of healing. I did not understand there were layers of vulnerability. And I recognize that I'm at a new layer of vulnerability. Because last year I would have told you I'm really vulnerable. And now what I recognize is I was definitely compared to, 2 years before, but this is like
not compared to today.
Definitely not. And so I'm experiencing this new level of vulnerability and healing. And so what's happened is I've exposed this kind of grief, this trauma that's been trapped in there. And I recognize that my biggest job right now is to change nothing about my experience except for the amount of love I give myself. And so my practices now, my rituals now every day are hand over heart. I love you. I mean, I'm giving myself self-compassion all over the place, like total grace, total self-compassion. And so I was really grateful for her episode, and it was very timely because I didn't know it, but I was on the cusp of really needing that reminder. And that's how the universe works. I mean, the universe.
Well, what's the name of that book?
I knew you were going to say that. Heart-minded. I think it is called Heart-minded. Sarah Blondin, she's on Insight Timer. She's got a ton of meditations. Her meditations are beautiful. Like, one of them I did last night, and it's essentially like you put your hand over your heart, you put your hand on your forehead, and it's in your heart tells your mind, thank you for trying to keep me safe. Thank you for the job you've done protecting me. And now it's my turn. I don't need you to protect me anymore. I'm ready for my heart. My heart is ready and willing and able to guide me through this moment. So take a rest. Thank you for all you've done. It's essentially this recognition that all of those coping strategies that we formed, initially when we experienced fear at the beginning of our lives, those coping strategies, they served us for a time. And now I don't need them anymore. Now I am a 40-year-old woman, and it is time to allow those strategies to go away. And my strategies live in my mind. Like, I retreated to my mind. And so I am really working on, allowing my heart to do the thinking and my heart to do the guiding. And it's really difficult because it's very raw. I've explained that, like, literally I have a tissue box in every single room because at any moment I could just start to cry. And that is completely opposite of me. Mary, you can attest to this. That is not me. I have not been a crier. And so I even said to my sons, we sat down for dinner as a family last night, and I knew that even if they didn't see me, be emotional, they could feel something energetically. And I am willing for them to see me be emotional, but there's a difference between them seeing me emotional and them seeing me raw. And so I'm trying to find that balance, but I really wanted to just validate their experience, that they could probably feel that energetically something's going on with me. And so I just said, to them, I said, I want you to know, because we do a thing that we learn. Well, it's an adaptation, but we adapted it from a practice since reading Abby Wambach's book, Wolfpack, which everybody read it with your child, read it with your child, read it with your child. I'd love to do an episode just on that. One of the things we do is we say, something that we're grateful for. And we also do a shout out, which is something that somebody else did that was really cool. It's a way of, like, honoring ourselves and calling out the goodness in other people. And so I use that moment to say, Mom has remembered, some things that, about the time when she was small. For the first time, she's remembering them. And some of them are sad. And so I've found these people. That was my shout out. I found these people who are helping me to, it's kind of like when you fall and you get hurt and Mom gives you a hug and says, I'm so sorry that happens. Like, I've found people that are helping me to do that. So I used, that sentence. So all of that to say that I recognize that vulnerability, just like healing, has layers, and it is such a brave thing to do when you decide to really, show up in your life and be vulnerable and expose your heart. And be willing to cry in front of other people. To me, that is like a huge deal, like being able to just cry and allow myself to do that. So
I think that is the big deal. I'm more heart-centered and emotional, but it's a big deal for me too. I think for most people.
Like, do you have a voice in your head? Because this is true for me. Do you have a voice in your head when you start to cry, if there are other people around, or even if there's not, a voice in your head that immediately says, stop, 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 stop?
No, but I don't think so. But I will tell you, like, when I was in middle school, but middle school was the worst. In elementary school, but every time somebody breathed the wrong way, I was crying.
Yeah, that's how I feel right now.
Yeah. So and during that time, it was so embarrassing because I'll be at school, during lunch or whatever, and I would just start crying.
Yes.
And it happened all the time. And I think at some point I stopped that.
Yeah. Maybe you got it out. Maybe it was that it
needed
to get out.
I think it was a probably a defense mechanism covering over. And it was when I went through my divorce, and you actually told me if you're in the grocery store and it comes out, just let it out.
Oh no, I'm really good at telling other people to do it.
I know, but it was a good advice and good for you to practice now too. So I did that, if it came out, then I just let it come. And so that was kind of a healing moment in my life from the earlier phase where I just learned to repress it, and because it didn't feel safe, and
Right.
And, you learn that it's not always appropriate to express your emotions.
Right.
And so I've learned how to kind of balance it and let it come out and let it go some of the times. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of bring up is, I think we haven't said it in these terms, but I know what you're talking about and what I've experienced myself, is life is hard. And I think that is why we're talking about this stuff.
Right.
Life is hard. Life is hard.
Yeah.
And so, that's one of the things that I kind of wrote down with, when I listened to the episode with Jim, because what stood out was the vulnerability piece, and him being willing to do it anyway, to show up anyway, and with Susan to be kind to herself anyway.
Right.
And so that's what to me, that's what this podcast is about, is how do I tolerate life, and not just tolerate, but to live it more fully. To create more is my thing, that I do. But how do I do that in a way that honors my essence, honors who I am, and how do we help others do it too?
I agree. And I also think that, so life is hard. And one of the things that I am learning is that life is hard, but my heart is easy. And I can drop into my heart in any moment and find peace and equilibrium. And it's the cultivating of that practice, the cultivating of that ultimately gets us to a place where we don't experience life as hard anymore. Like, I think that you can attest, certainly I can, life is easier, much easier than it was 20 years ago. Much easier than it was 10 years ago. Life has gotten easier and easier, but there are moments in which a new level of healing is happening. And in those moments, those are hard. But on the other side is the payoff. On the other side is deeper joy, more of yourself. And so the recognition is, for me, what I want people to hear is, if you're in a hard moment, it's on purpose, and on the other side of it, you are promised joy if you can show up, and create more, right? If you show up in that way, you will get to a place where life is easy and you're in the flow again. And that's the journey. The journey is one of growth. And then you'll go through a period, and then it'll be another time of healing, and you'll think, oh my gosh. And I can't believe it, because I thought I'd already healed. And I tell people all the time, I recognize that this is a journey and that it, happens in layers, but it's still surprising when you get to another layer and you get to a hard moment. It still surprises the heck out of me. And I'm like, really? I thought I'd done this, and the truth is you had, and you done it to the level that was perfect for then. And now you've grown, and now you're ready for the next level of healing, the next level of bliss, because that's what's on the other side.
Yes. And I completely agree with what you're saying. And when I was saying life is hard, I'm really glad that you were like, yes, and there's also this. And I think one of the things that happened with me, and I think this happened with you too. And even though you and I have been on a journey, parallel journey, and done a lot of work together, relying on each other, one of the things that I think is important to kind of mention is at some point I had to do it alone, and you did too.
Yeah.
And that's true for all of us. We can't, we're born, even if you're a twin or something, you're born alone. You come out of the womb by yourself, and die the same way.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a part of existentialism. And so what I think is important is that, yes, we have to do it alone. Sometimes there's pieces that we have to go through alone, but also recognizing that there's support out there. And maybe like me, I mean, this is what happened to me. A lot of my support system from 7 years ago is gone. Right. And there were new people that came in and offered new support for that 7-year journey. But then a lot of those people fell away too. And that's painful when those relationships kind of fall away, things kind of end. But recognizing that that is part of the process sometimes for some people. Mm-hmm. And new people will show up when the time is right.
Right, because the universe is supporting you. And that's exactly what Susan said. Remember when she said, the first thing you do is you acknowledge this is a moment of struggle. And I am not alone, because the reality is everybody experiences struggle. Do you experience my struggle? No. But pain equals pain equals pain. Your pain hurts the same way my pain hurts. And so you can get to a place where even in your kind of loneliest moment, in your moment of struggle, you can recognize that you are not alone in your struggle. There are countless people that are going through struggle. I mean, most of us are a lot of the time. I mean, at least at moments. Right. And so I am so thankful. I'm going to take this minute to thank Susan Yelverton and Jim Dukes, and just say thank you both so much for your message that you brought. I am so grateful for all of the peeps that have been joining us. And Mary, you got some great peeps. You even thought of another one. So we're going to, I know.
Well, speaking of peeps, I just want to mention the Create More Peace group on Facebook. So this is a group for you to connect with people who are on this journey of, using art perhaps as healing. Maybe that is something you want to learn more about, but it's not just about the art. It's about creating more of the life you were born to live, creating more peace, creating more joy. So please join us in that group and connect with us so that you do have the support that you're looking for.
Yeah, Mary and I are on that group. So I'm on there all the time posting stuff that I do. And so you can connect with us very easily by joining that free Facebook group. So thank you all for listening. It has been a beautiful day as always. You have been listening to True and Unpolished, the podcast. Let's see what happens next.